Alright, so we are recording this screen right now. So, this is Keenan's throw. We're going to go through it once, fast, and then I'm going to edit it, drop it down to slow-mo, and then go through and just kind of show you guys what's up here, okay? There we go.
Damn, son!
If you saw the little point at the end.
Yeah.
He's like,
Hold on, can we zoom in on this right here?
Yeah.
Can we zoom in on that face?
He's like staring down the wall. There's more where that came from.
Oh, man.
This is like the Darcy better give me
That's the point.
Oh.
Boom.
I think I saw a
Right.
GIF opportunity here.
So let's change the speed here, drop it down to 20.
Ooh.
And oops, wrong one. There we go. So now we're gonna play it.
I drop it down to 20 what?
Okay, so we're gonna skip. And what is happening here? We've got essentially he's gonna bring this foot out all the way over here, and his arms all the way behind him, right? So the body works as a tense aggregate unit. It's pretty much all elastic and kind of like muscular tensions. We're not built like a brick house where bricks are like just stacked on top of each other. We are like solid objects floating in space that are connected by elastic type of objects. So what throwing mostly is getting your arm all the way back there, and you're putting tension on this whole line here, including his leg. So once his knee comes out here, once his foot comes out here, he's going to have maximal tension all the way through that muscular sling right there. And then we're going to watch that kind of collapse and use muscular ability as well as elastic ability to produce a good throw, right? The more muscle you have, awesome. The better form you have, the more you can take advantage of that elastic action potential, right?
You also have the back leg, right? Where that's
Exactly.
acting as
So
a
we're
giant
gonna
spring right now.
we're gonna go through a couple different things, but here we go. So let me switch that.
that was the juicy part.
God damn, I'm sorry, I ruined it. Do it all over.
As you can see here, he's got a good plant, right? What happened with his knee was he was facing sideways, right? His hips were facing in this direction. Now they're kind of facing here. That happens when this knee can rotate inwards. And what you're going to watch is, because he has a very baseball-esque throw, he's going to drag that foot. Now most people don't have the, what we call hip extension. So this knee ability to get back in relation to the hip moving forward. And so what you'll see with other players is their leg will come up to the side to facilitate that throw. His comes up afterwards, but he's able to essentially drag this through and let this whole muscular sling work without having any kind of like byproducts of nasty stuff like that. This foot here, when this plants, it stays planted for the most part. And this is relative internal rotation of the hip. So this fancy hip right here. We have the foot
Just
pointing
close
here.
that
Yeah. We have the we have the foot pointing here. Inward.
So pretty.
And his hip is going to rotate around this way with the rest of his arm. With that happening, this knee is pointing inwards, this foot is pointing inwards. The hip is internally rotating. Most people don't have a whole lot of internal rotation, so you'll notice the players with the weakest throws or the less force, the slowest speeds, their foot will skip this way as they throw, or they won't be able to maintain this internal rotation. You'll see a couple other breakdowns, but he's got a good plant here. This is going to come all the way through. He's basically going to bring let's get that out of the way, the right shoulder down to the left hip, and then everything else is just assisting that, right? So Billy, you talked about the spring. There's no more spring here. It's already set in motion. So here we go. Boom. So still internally rotated, right there. His hips almost coming all the way around. He's still dragging his foot. And this is going to have a follow through where it just kind of drops over to his left side. And then the rest of it is the foot's going to come up, and then this is just going to kind of dangle. During this motion, this is where most people have rotator cuff issues. These guys right here that are controlling this kind of rotational motion, those guys have to slow down the movement, or else your hand would keep spiraling, and it just goes off. It just pops off. And that's what tends to happen with a couple players in the league, right? They will throw, and then the arm just keeps going, and then they have to pop it back in place. So, so let's just watch the rest of this.
Broke your leg.
Oh man, I'm like, wow. Look at his MCL. It's just like bending. I'm like, ooh, that looks painful.
I'm telling you, I
Is
think
it
watch
giraffe?
again.
Fucking pictures.
It goes out. Arms ready. This sling is fully tense. He starts using his muscular ability. This is going to come over and then internally rotate right here. So it's going to basically drop down to this side. This foot stays here. This one drags. And if you just watch this way, it comes up. His body bounces back.
That's Marvin. That's
So I have a question for Keenan.
Sure.
What do you think when you see this video in slow-mo of yourself throwing?
I've watched it too many times so far, actually. But hey, just small critiques to it. I think that if I get the opportunity to get some sort of hop skip into a throw like this, then I should be able to push off a little bit harder with my back leg, as well as it looks like the angle of my arm when I'm throwing could be either raised up or lowered down, depending on what kind of spin I want off the ball, or if I want a little bit more velocity, anything like that, because that's kind of a middle ground between a sidearm and an overhand throw. So I think that I'm missing out on just a little bit of the kind of muscular structure of the chest instead of using all kind of the spinning velocity. So.
Good question. Good question.
Well, there's a point you brought up there, which is something good to think about, which is in baseball they tell you, like, you'll see people, they have the bat up in the air and they start wagging it around.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when the pitcher throws, when you're wagging that thing around, your body's at a different point at different times when that ball comes, and you have an inconsistency in the way you swing based on where you stop and start your swing. So there's these minor differences.
Mm-hmm.
And where your arm starts, if you're coming from here and then up before you throw, there's going to be a minor difference as to where it is before you come around.
Mm-hmm.
So reducing the number of motions you do, like to simplify your throw, is going to make you more accurate.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the same thing. You have less variances.
Sure.
And another thing, you bring your arm around, which is one thing we didn't bring up before, is you have the counter rotation of the arm that isn't throwing, forcing it back through.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from the normal mechanics, that's a really good point, Bill. Aside from the normal mechanics, the stuff that I tend to see problems with in throwing sports is that we want to look where we're going, right? And that is neck rotation. And so if someone's upper back, like if we're just like looking at an x-ray of his spine, if that portion of his upper back can't rotate or is stuck because of old injuries or their posture consistently at work, repetitive stress, or if they have neck issues, their whole body will not be able to facilitate this motion. Right? So being able to look where you throw is important, right? And so Keenan has that neck mobility, which is awesome. And then he's got internal rotation of the hips, awesome. He's got good extension of the arm and able to like maximize the potential for that sling from the right shoulder to the left hip. And then he's got enough hip extension in that other hip to allow for more smooth motion. Just like you said, Bill, we don't want like a whole bunch of legs just flipping around there because it's super goofy and it throws off your throw, right? So he uses it as a good counterbalance as he comes through, as we'll see.
Keenan, do you have any questions for the sports doc about the throwing motion?
Okay, so is it alright if we share a little bit of what's going on?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we talked about is using that fascial sling, that elastic sling. And Keenan has a couple issues, one with the shoulder and then one with the outside of the bicep there. From that maximally externally rotated position before he comes into this, so when it's still back here, he has to use a whole bunch of internal rotators that are on the inside of the bicep, like the lats, you have subscap, and then you're using, of course, your pecs and your obliques. Those guys are firing so quickly that, and I mean, you can just see it in slow motion, that what's, like, just like we talked about before, like, what's going to slow it down. So look where he's taped right here, and that's exactly where these guys start pulling back on the arm, the opposite direction, as this happens, right? There's a little bit of that fascia, a little bit of elastic to help with that, but mostly it's muscles that are slowing it down, especially so he can react to the next ball that's thrown at him, or to, you know, do the next movement. So no chronic dislocations or anything, which is good. So that means his muscles right here are strong enough to hold the arm in its socket. However, the stress is going straight to one of the deltoid tendons and one of the some of the external rotators, like teres minor and infraspinatus, which have tendons that run right along here. So this is an owie spot. Essentially, is what I'm saying.
The technical term.
Yeah, how we can make that not happen. Essentially, what I'm saying is, these guys are overworking. You are throwing so hard that these guys are overworking. Well, you could throw slower, but who would want to do that, right?
Yeah,
So
I think that's the best
the other
advice.
thing-
Yeah, continue.
the other thing is to be able to have enough left rotation of your torso here, so throughout the lumbar spine and throughout the thoracic spine, to be able to slow down the motion even further. Instead of these guys having to overwork, allow yourself a little bit more motion, right? Let your foot come around more, let your arm go over more, and it dissipates the force, right? When you look at ninjas or you look at Aikido practitioners, any sort of martial arts where there's falling involved, what they try and do is, a fall's going to happen one way or another, right? And the same force is going to happen one way or another. What they do is they spread out that force over time, right? So you can hit the ground and just be happy with that, or you can hit the ground and roll, or hit the ground and slap, or any number of other things. And this is essentially what I'm saying here. So if you had a little bit more left rotation of the thorax, if we let this leg come around a little bit more, kind of let go of this pivot foot so you can actually have some circular motion, which we'll see on some other throwers. And then let your arm just come around before you try to immediately stop the throw. It'll disperse the force enough for that guy to heal quicker and not get beat up, as well as be able to, once it's healed, to facilitate that motion every single time without injury.
So
My perspective. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Does.
no, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You have to like
It's-
incorporate a post-throw spin move. Is that what we're talking about?
You have to strengthen the muscles that slow down the actual throw. Because that's
Yeah.
what I was watching some videos on strengthening the rear deltoid and back,
Uh-huh.
and they're saying that that's why baseball players don't necessarily do any front deltoid or chest workouts, because that needs to be as loose as possible. But they do a ton of rear deltoids and
Yeah,
lat workouts.
there's different fibers working essentially,
Yeah.
right? So you've got quick twitch fibers that are making the action happen, and then you've got all these other muscles
That's
and
slow
fibers
down.
are working that are trying to slow it down, and different actions that are happening in the muscle itself. So once a muscle feels a stretch, we have basically an organ in the muscle that senses a stretch reflex. Like if I go to do the splits and I catch myself, that's a stretch reflex. So what they're feeling is, as you throw, the stretch reflex kicks in, they start tightening up to save the joint, essentially, and you'd rather have a muscle a little bit damaged because it heals quicker than the joint. So you can strengthen the backside. The trick is, how do you strengthen that when it's already damaged right now? Right, so you have to get to the
muscles around it.
you have to get to the point where that muscle heals, and then you can start rehabbing it with like working out and strength stuff. So like I would be sending him to like Ren Fitness for throwing stuff, like or external
Shout out to
rotator.
Ren Fitness.
Yeah, shout out to Ren Fitness.
Or
He
Domino's.
lays
Tell him to get
ends
fat
out.
and sit down for a while.
Yeah.
Shout out to
Shout out
Domino's.
to Domino's.
That's
So
like
there's
a couple options. That's a really good question.
there's one other thing I notice here, which is his front foot seems to be internally rotated from what I
Correct.
normally see.
Yeah.
Whereas normally you want to you want to point your foot to where you're throwing. I don't know if that actually has an impact here on like where his knee is,
So,
or is it closing the hip, or
If he was pointed this way, he would have this extra degree of motion through his hips, so he would be able to bring his hips around this much further. So if his foot was pointed straight forward, it may take some time for him to get used to like the coordination of that throw and be accurate with that. But if it's straight forward, then he can actually come out of the throw a little bit better. So yes, and what is still essential is that rotation at the hip, because it's not coming from the ankle. The ankle is just like if I don't know. I don't have a good metaphor right now, okay? but yeah, all this is basically telling you what's going on at the hip right there.
There used to be an old scouting report on Zach. He was notorious for like no-look throws, but if you watched his front foot, he would point.
Yeah, you're pointing to where he's throwing.
He's throwing, and he was great at throwing with open body, like out to the left, but that toe would be pointed out to the left. So that little tidbit.
Sweet.
Sorry, Zach.
I forgot who told me that, but he's like, hey man, if you're ever on Zach's right side, just look at his toe, and you know where that throw is gonna go. I'm like, all right, word. I forgot who told me, but yeah.
and then once you start looking up from the toe, the ball
It's
is
like, boom.
here.
You're like, oh, it's me.
It was me the whole time.